Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I welcome everybody that's joined us today and our special guest, Julia Gilberto. Is that how you say it? Gilberto?
Yeah.
I didn't check that before we started, so I'm glad I got that right. Before we go into introductions, I'm going to start off with kind of a story of a saint, and then we're going to ask for her intercession today. That saint is Blessed Margaret of Castello. And I'm not quite sure how many people are familiar with her. I actually learned about her a few years ago from our special education department in the Catholic Schools office after they named their kind of enculturation program into Catholic schools with the Blessed Margaret Castello School for Adaptive Needs. So I'm going to read a little bit about Blessed Margaret, and then we'll ask her to intercede for us. So she was born in Matola, Italy in 1287, and her parents were very wealthy. I mean, like they lived in a castle. And from birth, she had very severe physical disabilities, short in stature. She was blind, and then she had curvature of the spine, which a lot of people might equate to like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And so she had this for her whole lifetime. So her parents confined her to a small room for 14 years, and the cell was adjacent to a chapel. So she could actually hear Mass being said every day from a distance. And she had a few visitors, but a main visitor was a priest that came to her, and he recognized her high intelligence. He recognized her ability to be taught the basics of the faith. So she just had this great capacity for faith. Years later, she moved to Castello, and although rejected at the time by people that were with her, she eventually became a third order Dominican, and she lived the rest of her life working with people that were suffering. So it's a great tribute to Blessed Margaret Castello today to be talking about how we serve people with disabilities. So let's begin with prayer and asking for her intercession. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O God, by whose will the Blessed Virgin Margaret was blind from birth, that the eyes of her mind, being inwardly enlightened, she might think without ceasing on you alone. Be the light of our eyes, that we may be able to flee the shadows of this world and reach the home of never-ending light. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. And Blessed Margaret Castello, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I see that Cassie's joined us too. Hey, Cassie, welcome. Welcome, everybody, to our monthly focus workshop today. And really excited to talk about this in the month that we celebrate vocations, coming off of the month that we've celebrated the importance of the dignity of life. And I thought it was really appropriate to talk about how we serve those with special needs, and not only catechesis, but in a broader spectrum too, in our parishes, in our families, and in our community. And what sparked this, which was even motivated, was by my friend Sarah No, who's on our webinar today, who actually sent me an email asking about sacramental prep, formation guidelines, and how-tos for people with special needs. So Sarah knows me well because we worked together at St. Thomas More, and she knows that when you ask me one question, it's going to end up being like this huge kind of like, you're going to get the whole picture. So today we want to start off with just talking about the Pastoral Statement from the Usccb that talks about persons with disabilities. And then we're going to invite Julia to introduce us to the platform of National Catholic Partners with Disabilities, Partnership on Disability. And then if we have time, we'll do Q&A with Julia, and then we'll go into some of the research that we've done for adaptive catechesis, not necessarily only for sacramental prep, but also for parish schools of religion and other things in our ministries. So real quick, I'm going to share my screen with you. Many of you may be familiar with this document. Y'all see that? Thumbs up? Yes. Okay, good. So this is the Pastoral Statement of the U.S. Catholic Bishops on Persons with Disability that was promulgated in 1978, but updated in 1998. And the premise there, although it seems like it's an older document, the premise there is still very alive and well. So I just highlighted a few areas that kind of touch on their general overview and kind of an approach to working with people with disabilities and serving them, and then on the parish level, and then on the diocesan level as well. So they begin this document talking about the same Jesus who heard the cry for recognition from the disabled of Judea and Samaria 2,000 years ago, calls us as followers to embrace our responsibility to our own disabled brothers and sisters in the United States. The Catholic Church pursues its mission by furthering the spiritual, intellectual, moral, and physical development of the people it serves. So it's very important foundation that as Christ did, so too we do today. Then they talk about kind of the prejudice that starts from just the perception of seeing that somebody is different, right? Whether physical or psychological. And says down through the ages, people have tended to interpret these differences in crude moral terms, like our group is different from their group, right? So it's better in some vague, compelling way, right, to just say that few of us would admit that we're like maybe prejudiced against, but maybe not too, right? So we don't feel like we have such a prejudice against people with disabilities. We bear these people with no ill will and do not knowingly seek to abrogate their rights, right? But yes, disabled individuals are visibly and sometimes bluntly different from the norm, and we react to this difference in some ways. It's just a reality. But what disabled individuals need, first of all, is the acceptance in this difference, and that neither can be denied or overlooked. So we cannot deny the fact that there's a difference, but we also cannot overlook it as well. And of course, we're reminded in Romans 13:9, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So in that wisdom, Jesus said, as yourself. So that's that basic concept. We must love others from the inside out, so to speak, accepting their difference from us in the same way that we accept our difference from them too. So the church, through the response of its members and to the needs of their neighbors, and through its parishes, healthcare institutions, social service agencies, because see how broad the scope is, has always attempted to show pastoral concern for disabled individuals. However, in the spirit of humble candor, we must acknowledge that at times we've responded to the needs of some of our disabled people only after circumstances or public opinion have compelled us to do so. So sometimes it's only after something has instigated it that we move. But the church must continue to expand its healing ministry to these persons, helping them when necessary, working with them and raising its voice with them and with all of society who they are their advocates, right? So we advocate for each other. Then they kind of move through the persons with disabilities and the ecclesial community. So what about the church community? Just as the church must do all in its power to help ensure persons with disabilities a secure place in the human community, so it must reach out to welcome gratefully those who seek to participate in the ecclesial community. So how are we actively seeking out those that wish to participate in our communities of faith? The leaders and the general membership of the church, this is important, must educate themselves to appreciate fully the contribution persons with disabilities can make to the church's spiritual life. Disabled individuals bring with them special insight into the meaning of life, for they live more than the rest of us, perhaps in the shadow of the cross. And out of their experience, they forge virtues such as courage and patience and perseverance and compassion and sensitivity that should serve as an inspiration to all Christians. So we issue invitations and we pursue that with them. So not only do we issue the invitations, we follow up with the invitations. For others, somehow, full participation can only come about if the church exerts itself to devise innovative programs and techniques, which is why we're here today. We must undertake forms of evangelization that speak to the particular needs of persons with disabilities, make those liturgical adaptations that promote their active participation, and provide help and services that reflect our loving concern for those with serious problems. And then that concern extends over to the families. And we all know families that serve and have children with special needs, and family members too. They need to know that others stand with them, at least in spirit, as we help their children along this path. On the parish level, the parish is the door to participation for persons with disabilities, and it's the responsibility of the pastor and the lay leaders to make sure this door is always open, always open. It may not be easy. It involves some persons with disabilities in parish life. It may be challenging to the ingenuity and commitment of the entire congregation. Yet, in order to be loyal to its calling and be truly pastoral, the parish must make sure that it does not exclude any Catholic that would like to take part in these activities. It's very important. And of course, it's essential that all forms of the liturgy be completely accessible with persons with disabilities, since these forms are the essence of spiritual life that ties us together as a community. So evangelization and catechesis for persons with disabilities must be geared in content and method in their particular situation. So specialized catechists should help them interpret the meaning of their lives and should give witness to Christ's presence in the local community in ways they can understand it and appreciate it. And they refer to the National Directory for Catechesis, but later on, I'll point to you where the new or updated Directory for Catechesis talks about persons with disabilities that we talked about in the workshop back in July or August. So parishes and dioceses, like the diocesan role, is to encourage and support training for all clergists, religious seminarians, and lay ministry leaders, focusing special attention on those actually serving people with disabilities, whether in parishes or in some other setting. Religious education personnel could profit from guidance in adapting their curricula to the needs of disabled learners, and Catholic elementary and secondary school teachers could provide in-service training on how best to integrate disabled students into programs of regular education. So the coordination of educational services within the diocese should supplement the provision for direct educational aids, which we are working for right now on this point. So just some things to think about as we move forward and this kind of incredible endeavor for us. So I want to kind of segue into how I came to know about the National Catholic Partnership with Disability. There was an email sent out. There was a webinar, because we have lots of webinars and opportunities to learn through this virtual event. I'm so grateful for it, because I probably couldn't have gone to a conference, but I could definitely go to a webinar. Charlene Katra, who wrote the book Adaptive Catechesis, I don't have it at my fingertips, but it's through Loyola Press, was the presenter of the webinar. She's also the executive director of National Catholic Partnership on Disability. So she's going to be with us in January to give us some very detailed specifics on adaptive catechesis. But today we have Julia Gilberto, who is an incredible, precious young woman. And she was on the initial webinar as well. So she's the manager of programs and resource development. And she comes to us today from Boston, Massachusetts, which she said they already had snow this year.
Yep.
Which is great. I know. So I'm going to give you a little bit of her bio, and I'm going to hand it over to her, and she's going to help us kind of take us through the website, because I really want to show you what they have to offer, including catechesis, but outside of that too. So Julia works to identify, share, and develop best practices, programs, and resources which reflect the mission of NCPD. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Human Services and Rehabilitation in Theology from Assumption College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and a Master of Arts in Historical and Systematic Theology from Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Her graduate research focused on a theological narrative that reflects and fosters belonging with individuals profoundly affected by autism spectrum disorder. She has 6 years of experience working with individuals with disabilities in school and as a personal care attendant. So I'm going to hand our form over to Julia. So thanks, Julia, for being with us today.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you for starting with the pastoral statement. That just got me fired up and excited to talk about this. So NCPD, it started in 1982 out of a response to that exact statement. Towards the end of the document, there's a part that talks about how on a national level, we need an organization that facilitates and implements the pastoral statement. And that's how NCPD came to be. So our office I'm in Boston, but our office is it's located right next to the USCCB, and we work with parishes and dioceses and consulting with the USCCB to implement that statement. So it's really, really very exciting. And last year was actually the 40th anniversary of that statement. And we had a symposium, which I can show you on the website, where you can access all of the lectures from that symposium. But one of them had the primary writer of the Pastoral Statement on Disabilities. And he talks about writing that statement and his own personal experience with disability and how that helped him to write the statement. And there's conversations with him and other theologians talking about how timeless that document it is. And he's mentioned that out of all the statements that he's ever wrote, of all his years at USCCB, that's the one that is still the most relevant and the most helpful today. So I'll definitely show you where that is on the website, but thank you again for talking about that, because it always gets me excited. So as Dina said, I'm the manager of programs and resource development. So one of the things I do is I help to manage the website and put new resources on the website. So if you're ever looking for a resource or think there should be a resource that isn't on there, please let me know. I love hearing from you all, those who are really working in the parishes and in the diocese. You know best what we need up there. So definitely contact me if there's anything you think is missing or if there's anything you'd like to see. I'm also the staff liaison for the education and the mission committee. So we have an education committee that works with Catholic schools to ensure that Catholic schools are more inclusive, and then also works to try to think about different curriculums that could be helpful for catechesis and things like that. So we have that education committee, and we also have a mission committee that talks about really the pastoral statement of really the mission, that beginning of the pastoral statement. How do we talk about accessibility? And I love that line that you shared, Dina, how we somehow think of ourselves as apart from persons with disabilities and not completely one of us. So the mission committee really just dwells on that statement and looks at the church fathers and the catechism and the gospel and says, how can we more fully believe and undergo conversion so that we actually do see each other as one. So that's kind of the role of the mission committee. We also have a monthly blog that has reflections from persons with disabilities. So I'll show you where you can access that. And we have also just other theological events, which I can show you. So after all that talking, I will show you the actual website and give you a tour of it. So I'm going to share my screen now to all panelists. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay, are you all seeing the website now?
Yes, yeah. Can everybody see it, even our guests?
Okay, so here is the website. As you can see right here, you can sign up for e-news, and that's where you'll get our monthly blog posts and all of the resources that we gather each month. So blog posts, adopted faith formation, Facebook Lives that we have going on talking about various types of disabilities and various initiatives in the church. All of that you can get from our email list, which you can sign up for here. We're also very active on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So if you want to follow us there, we're constantly posting new events or new tools, or even just scripture verses that are applicable to this topic. So you can follow us there. But we've tried to arrange the website. It's fairly new. We renovated it about a year ago, and we tried to arrange it so that it would reach all different types of audiences, because disability is something that affects the entire church, and everyone has a role in ensuring access in the church. So we have the website broken up into dioceses and parishes, individuals who experience disability, families and caregivers, partner organizations, Catholic schools and clergy, and all types of resources that are specific to those audiences. and also all the varying types of disability. Disability is so incredibly broad, so we tried to categorize it as much as possible, even though these specific ones in general also are so incredibly broad. But this can hopefully give you a little bit of a roadmap to see what you may need of why you arrived to the website. We also have information about diocesan directors across the country, information about our Council on Mental Illness that helps us to provide resources pertaining to mental illness, and then our Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And then we also have our Twitter and Facebook here and some quick links that would be helpful: access surveys, bishop statements, e-news, our large print Roman Missal, tools like that. But to talk first maybe about what you're mentioning is maybe one of the main interests of this webinar of talking about adaptive catechesis and teaching tools. I'd like to share with you this resource that our Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities has been working on. They have been, let's see when they've been working on it, since May. They've been working on it since May. They have been creating adaptive faith formation tools that families can use in their homes. This is something that a lot of people have really enjoyed because so much is online right now that to have a PDF that you can download to do some activities with your family, maybe in front of the fire or at your dining room table instead of a screen, is something that people have really appreciated. But there are just some great prayers and conversation points that can be talked about for various different themes. It's pretty long, very good document with a lot of content, so I won't go through it all right now, but I'll just give you a quick overview here. So there are activities that you can do with your family, and all of them do have that emphasis on adaptive catechesis. So using different types of sensory tools and really trying to approach a topic in various different types of way that would fit more in terms of universal design. So you can find these resources and these tools by going to Catechesis and Adapted Faith Formation and see all of the different months that cover that we've been covering topics. So November, we've been doing All Souls. September, we have one on the Archangels. And then you can feel free to look at all of the other themes that we have available. A lot of people have also been saying that the themes sometimes are broad enough that you don't need to do them in that particular month, but I think all of them could be used at any time. May is on Mary. You can talk about Mary any day of the week. So you can find that information here. We also have a page where we talk about catechetical publishers. All of the Catholic publishers that have been providing some great content and have really thought about how to make content adaptable to persons with disabilities. So right here, we have a list of those publishers that have really created some great content. And we've highlighted a specific resource that they have that we really recommend and have gotten some great feedback about. And then you can visit their website to see more of the adapted resources that they have. And so these really do vary. This one is a book Dina was mentioning, but written by our executive director, Charlene Katra. It's a very user-friendly, very, very helpful book with quick tips and tools that can be used in any classroom setting. Then there are other ones that are whole curriculums, such as Christ in Us for Sadlier. And then there's this pamphlet that simply talks about how to talk to children about people with disabilities. This is a quick little, maybe 5 to 10 page pamphlet. So it varies in the types of tools that you can use. So I'd really recommend seeing all of the various different types of tools that we have available here. We also have more catechetical tools and explanations and suggestions here by clicking on Catechesis. And some resources just to highlight. Earlier this year, we had a presentation by Erin Jeffries. Erin Jeffries is on our board, and she talks a lot about catechesis in the home and giving some suggestions for catechesis in the home. So you can find that information here. She also talks about some, great blogs or great activities that can be used that she finds really helpful. And this was a very popular presentation that we had. There's also a Returning to Mass social story, which is a great resource. You can find here another free resource that you can download. People always find social stories very helpful, and this was produced by the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. We also have strategic components for successfully working with individuals with autism spectrum disorder, and then some free special education online training that is also available, different organizations where you can really get some good evidence-based practice of talking about special education and tools that can be used for catechesis. So that's a little bit about catechetical tools that we have available. I'll also just show some resources that we have for dioceses and parishes. So right here, you can see the Loyola Press Opening Doors Parish Award. This is something that we partner with Loyola Press with every year, where people recommend parishes that have really embodied what it means to be an accessible and welcoming parish. So you can learn about this beautiful parish in Oregon and all of the various ways in which they are accessible to persons with disabilities. And what I really like about this particular parish is it's a very wide spectrum of different access tips that can work for any parish. So some may have really required a bit of a financial investment, but then others are just very simple and things that any parish could do, no matter whether they are able to financially invest in something like that or not. So I really recommend looking at this resource. It's definitely very motivational to see what this parish has done. As I mentioned, we had a symposium last year that talked about theology and disability, and all of those resources are free on our website here. So you can look at all of these different presentations and take advantage of those presentations. Some focus really on Aquinas's understanding of disability and talking about how Aquinas's understanding of disability can really affirm the work that we're doing. There's been critiques over the years that Aquinas's work does not do so. So being able to really dig deep into looking at what Aquinas is actually saying is what we spend a lot of the time doing here. And so that's what some of these lectures are about. Other ones are more pastoral, disability behind the invisible curtain. That is Dr. Dave Byers, who drafted the Pastoral Statement, as I was telling you earlier. So he talks about his story writing the Pastoral Statement, what inspired him, and how he really still thinks about it and reflects on it today. As you remember in the Pastoral Statement, he talks about that invisible curtain that we often feel that is between a person with a disability and a person without a disability. And he talks about his personal experience feeling that and how the church can help with that misunderstanding. Then there are various conversations, and another great bishop's document is the Guidelines for the Celebrations of the Sacraments for Persons with Disabilities. This is something that we helped the U.S. bishops to revise in 2017 to kind of take into consideration some things that have changed since it was first published in the 1980s. So, for example, now the use of iPads and things like that. How do we take into consideration technology when it comes to a person receiving the sacrament of confession or reconciliation when they might not be able to vocally talk? So how do we navigate that topic? A lot of really interesting talks about feeding tubes as well and how we understand that. So to look more into those types of questions, really going into each specific sacrament, you can look at this presentation. I really recommend this presentation for any parish. It's very practical. It was something that was presented by Sister Kathleen Shapani out of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, who is very, very good at talking about this. We have a virtual lecture actually happening tonight with the Catholic University of America. I really encourage you to attend. It's going to be fantastic. We have some great speakers. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz is our Episcopal moderator, and he will be speaking about his experience. He has a brother with Down syndrome, and he was a social worker. And so he's very passionate about the topic of disability, and he'll be talking about that. And then there'll be a moderated discussion with the editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency, J.D. Flynn, and Dr. Miguel Romero. So that's going to be a great presentation that will be happening tonight at 7. So if you're interested in that, I'm sorry, 7 Eastern time. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go onto our website. It's going to be the first thing you see. Dina, what are we looking at in terms of time? I have some more things I can share, but if you think it makes more sense to open it up to discussion, we can do that as well.
Yeah, we can do that. One thing I remembered before we see if anybody has any questions or comments is sure. I saw in the news this morning, I think it was this morning, that the first person with Down syndrome actually ran an Ironman, I think it was. Wow. And he did the jog, the swim, and the bicycle. And he was the first young person with Down syndrome to complete the whole course. Yeah, so I saw that this morning on the news. I thought that was really appropriate that we were, about to get ready for this session right here. Does anybody have any questions, if you do, or any comments or anything particular that you want to ask Julia?
Yeah. Hi, Julia. Where is that theology link again for the discussions that were theological?
Yeah, sure. You can go right here to Dioceses and Parishes. Mm-hmm. And then it's right there, 2019, Symposium 2019.
Oh, I see. Okay. Under resources, Dioceses and Parishes, and then Symposium 2019. Okay.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah. And if you're interested in that, the talk tonight will also be recorded, so you can see it afterwards, but it's a lot of the same people who were there who will also be here, will be presenting tonight. So you'll probably enjoy that as well.
Oh yeah, I see J.D. Flynn there on the first one, and he's going to be there tonight as well.
Yes. Exactly.
Isn't he the editor for, is it CNA? Catholic News Agency?
Yeah, Catholic News Agency, yeah. He also has 2 children with Down syndrome, so he's very passionate about this topic. And wow. CNA is very good at covering disability. They often have articles about disability, and he really he's been very supportive over the years of NCPD, which we're very grateful for. He's also very funny.
I have one question before I let somebody else have a chance.
Sure.
While I have your attention, a few years ago, well, more than a few now, maybe a decade ago, I was a DRE at a parish, and we were doing catechesis, and we had somebody with special needs, and it was really interesting because he had so many different gifts, but all together it was just really hard to tell sometimes. I'll put it to you this way: we didn't have labels or anything to understand him well because we were in a very poor neighborhood, and his reason for coming to our parish and everything were not necessarily completely discernible. But I ended up being sort of his special catechist, and I got to develop a relationship with him. But after 1 year of him going through our program, he didn't meet, this is upsetting to me, he didn't meet the pastor's intellectual criteria, and so was denied the sacrament for another year of he was able to be baptized, but confirmation was delayed and stuff like that. And in general, we were not well equipped, both for understanding the theological dimension and also kind of liturgical dimension of this would be considered adult initiation for a new Catholic. And I was very disappointed. Thankfully, he stayed and continued to become more part of the community and continued and received those sacraments the following year. But I was just wondering what resources, for instance, I mean, that was kind of like an RCIA, even though I did it as part of or connected to the children's catechesis. What resources would you recommend, like for parish leaders and priests?
For being able to
basically
the sacramental
what are because I don't know. I know I'm opening a whole can of worms, so I'm not looking for a solution, sort of liturgical solution to some of the more difficult questions, but just how for people to be more prepared, especially priests, deacons, and parish catechetical leaders, for when an adult comes who has a host of different disabilities, and how do you what considerations do you take into place, and how do you act in a way that's pastoral?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. So I would say the Sacramental Guidelines would be your best bet. It really is an incredible document that was recently revised, and the recent revision really does take into consideration, canon law, but it also takes into consideration pastoral considerations.
Yeah.
Dr. Miguel Romero, which is the speaker who talks about theology here, he has a brother who has a profound intellectual disability, who has received the sacrament of confirmation. That's not something that should be denied. There are specific qualifications for receiving the Eucharist, but even that is something that needs to be very carefully talked about and considered, because if someone is not able to speak, for example, and say that they see the difference of distinguishing between Jesus and bread, but there's a flicker of their eye, that always does to their family know that this shows their assent,
Right.
Those are all things to consider. And if there's this lecture right here, I'll show you the one I was mentioning about the Sacramental Guidelines. That is something that I think would be really helpful to understand that document more. Not everyone might have time to look at this, but having the document in their parish is something really I would recommend for every parish. That's Archbishop Kurtz has mentioned that those guidelines should be in every parish across the United States, because everyone runs into these issues at some time of wanting to make sure that they're respecting the sacraments, but also not denying the sacraments to someone who really needs those sacraments for their own vocation.
And having some criteria, really, it's pastoral guidance for those of us who are in the field, so to speak. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, and after Julia's, over, and if we have time, there's a great book that I read. It's called How to Welcome, Include, and Catechize Children with Autism and Other Special Needs, by Deacon Lawrence Sutton. And he has a lot of what Julia was talking about, the practicals behind things like sacramental preparation. And if a child is unable to vocalize even reconciliation, just the acknowledgement of images of what is right and what is wrong, or simply to say, I'm sorry, or even write it or acknowledge it. Those are things too that can help people prepare people for the sacraments in particular. So all that is woven within some of these really great resources. and they address all of that too. It's quite fascinating, the amount of research and witnessing and documenting that people have had to kind of help with this.
Right. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. That's a wonderful book. Very practical and helpful. And this is another resource I was just thinking of under our clergy audience. Lecture, Habitual Lack of the Use of Reason and the Reception of the Sacraments. So that takes it from that specific lens, but he also talks about other disabilities as well.
Yeah, great.
So Julia, does anybody else have any questions? You can unmute your mic. Any of our participants? Any questions?
I'm going to try and pull this document up for everyone so they can have the link.
So Julia, what I was thinking too, it's kind of the first time we've really, as a general group, stepped into the area of formally working towards adaptive catechesis in a universal way. Here, a lot of parishes are doing it individually. So for those that are joining us, like kind of where do you start? I know some of the resources talk about it's a group effort, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say there's people on our platform right now that don't have any catechesis whatsoever, adaptive catechesis or any type of plan. Where do you think that they would start with all this?
I think that they would probably start with talking with a specific if they have a specific individual who has asked this question or a specific case, it would be sitting down with that specific person and their family members and developing something similar to an IEP, which is what you would see in a public school. There's some individualized religious education plans, which I can send you. That's part of our Opening Doors resource that we have available for purchase, but it's an individualized religious education plan. So looking at the specific strengths of that student or the specific needs. That's always where we say first to start is with the individual. In addition to that, in terms of accessibility in general, a lot of times forming a committee or writing in your parish bulletin or on your parish website that we want to start thinking about this better and we want to start looking at this question because sometimes there won't be someone who reaches out to the parish because they assume nothing's there. They assume that nothing is available. So asking the question, whether it be in the bulletin or having the parish at the end of Mass mention that this is something that we're looking into, that will get people to start raising their hand and say, yeah, that is something. I do have a child who isn't coming because I didn't think that there was something available. So then beginning to have those conversations and inviting them to a forum and seeing what works best. I think looking at those different resources from the different publishers, some work better for some students and some are for others. So looking at what works best. I think the Loyola Press Adaptive Kit is always a good start. Is that something that you've seen in your diocese? Sometimes they have adaptive kits where you let a parish borrow it to see if it's something that could be helpful, so that not every parish has to buy it. But that's something that can be helpful. And I think, just talking with the families and having those individual conversations, but really the outreach is so important. A lot of parishes have parish advocates, and that's a kind of way of talking about, they're the accessibility parish advocates. So if there's any question to be talked about in terms of accessibility, there's a specific person who is ready to receive those questions and ready to find answers. So that can also be a very helpful model.
That's a good idea. I like the idea of having a parish advocate for probably all different kinds of needs too. That can be a pastoral associate or could be just somebody else in particular. Right. We do have, just for those that are attending, and we'll get into resources in a few minutes, we just bought, it's actually on my floor. You can probably see the boxes back there. We just bought a second Finding God adaptive kit. So we actually have two of them. So it's, I don't know if those of you remember, it's kind of backwards, but you can see the endless possibilities of that resource. And we do have it available for people to check out. I loaned it out a few times and it's come back in pieces. So we're putting it in binders now. But I have found after reading it the other day, like going through all the different cards, that I've found it extremely helpful and enlightening.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any other questions for Julia while we're sitting here? If you can think of any, just pop them in the chat. But Julia, if you can stay on with us for a little while longer, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to go through, for those of us that are still here, I want to talk about kind of a response to Sarah and Melissa Harshbarger, who's the Parish Director of Formation at St. Patrick's, something that I put together for them. I have found that in approaching this, one of the things that I needed to do personally is to be well informed and read everything that I can about this, because it's a lack of specialty. You know, I've worked with young people with special needs. It was my senior project in high school for a whole semester, coming to what was then known as the Guardian Angel School. It's a school for special needs for children here, located at our diocese. And then with the Special Olympics when I was in college. So I've always had kind of an affinity, right? A love for people with special needs, and a curiosity too, as to the giftedness of knowing someone and understanding how the family is involved with that too. And then of course, having friends with children with different types of needs, from medical needs all the way to learning, just even the simplest learning, exceptional needs. So when came to the diocese, there was a shelf for special needs, for adaptive catechesis. And this book I pulled the other day that I just talked about, Deacon Lawrence Sutton's book, Dr. Deacon Lawrence Sutton's book on how to welcome, include, and catechize children with autism and other needs. So I got so into it, I actually wrote an outline on the book, and I can easily share that outline with people. I just went ahead and read it and then reread it and wrote an outline. Because it helped me really kind of dive deeply into it. And one of the things that Deacon Lawrence begins with is the approach, right? How are we approaching our families and then welcoming them, including them, and then catechizing them? So are we welcoming everybody at the table? And then how well prepared are we to do this? So there's a call to have a willingness. There's a great call for organization. There's a good calling for good, solid resources that everybody is well acquainted with, that's equipped with this and on this team. There's a clear pathway open, like opening the doors, as the document said from the Usccb, to welcome people in. There's an enormous emphasis on teenage mentors. So the opportunity for the teenagers to mentor to the children, the younger children with special needs, because there's a special bond that exists through them. And I guess I can attest for that too, because there was such a joy when I was able to do that when I was a senior in high school. We talked about how every Catholic deserves the opportunity to receive the sacraments. Every child is called to be a part of a loving community. And then what Julia was talking about is this broad spectrum of differences, a broad spectrum of ways that we can serve. So it's not just kind of a one isolated, but there's just so many different variants when it comes to serving people and including people and catechizing. They're very, 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 Deacon Sutton is very, very committed to one-to-one catechesis with young people. So it's a very specialized area, like Julia was saying, is prepared for that one child. But the goal is to prepare children as well as possible for the sacraments to the degree of which each child is capable of doing so. So like Julia was talking about, like what are their special needs and where they are and how can we get to know them and identify them? So how the materials presented, who does it? You know, how well they're trained and comfortable, and the communication and the language is all very, very, very important. You don't have to be a professional, is what he's saying, but you do have to have a greater understanding and a depth of understanding of how to accompany. Then he talks about how he quotes the scripture passage in Matthew 18, 1-5. And it talks about when Jesus pulls a child right into the middle of the midst, like who's the greatest of the kingdom in heaven? And he called the child over, placed it in the midst and said, "Amen, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me." So Deacon Sutton talks about how this is an example of how all people belong to the community. And it's not easy for parishes to make room for people with disabilities, right? It's not easy. It takes a whole lot of work, but we must reach out to them. We must listen to them, and we must make accommodations. And all of these extra steps are so unfamiliar to a lot of us because we've never done it before. But at the same time, just a little bit of like infliction, right, on how hard this is can result in an incredible fruitful ministry that's already established and ready to receive people with special needs. So again, not as the occasion arises, but it's already there in place, ready to go. And the reality is, and I've experienced this too on a diocesan level with parents coming to us for confirmation, is the fact that they feel like that their needs are forgotten, and they feel like their children have been forgotten. And sometimes it's not anybody's fault. It's just an opportunity to where we can grow. And some parents are scared that their children are going to fail, right? So they're worried, and they're not really quite trusting of what they're bringing their child to. Some of the techniques don't fit some of the children's needs. So that's where we can meet these challenges, and we can do it. He talks about pastoral documents that are really important, calling people to understand the best source of information and formation about a person's disabilities comes from their parent. They know them from the moment they took their breath. They know them, and they know their disabilities, especially if they've been born with it. And I can attest to that. And although it's a medical issue, my daughter has type 1 diabetes from when she was 9. I can tell you everything about it from the moment she was diagnosed to this day today, because you just know it, you know the patterns. So it's things like that that we can learn a lot from the parents. It's also a call to build these relationships with the parents, to get to know the parents. We can get to know the children, and then they get to know us and those that are serving that need. But he talks about at the heart of the catechesis, and this is monumental, and his advice is the teen faith mentors are so important. Also, to learn about the child, their limits, their boundaries, their abilities. Structure is very important. Routine is very important. Predictability is very important. It's like the same thing every time they come into the classroom, and any variance of that may upset a lot of our children or our adults that are seeking formation. Be prepared for change that limits anxiety. Repeat, repeat, repeat. He says a lot, and then use a lot of visual aids. And then he talks about a lot about understanding and getting to know the responses of each person that we're working with. So that's why the one-to-one catechesis is so important, because that person will work solely with that individual, and they'll start learning to know what mechanisms can help them grow in their faith, what things may trigger them a little bit, and then how to work with those anxieties as they happen. It just takes time. So providing individual catechesis. He talks about all of the kind of the spectrum from autism all the way to cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, hearing loss, visual impairment, all of that. But his main focus is on the one-to-one method. And how he presented it, advantages to that is basically learning the language of the child, or learning the language of the adult that's coming with us, because each person has their own different type of language depending upon their disability or their special needs. And so it's our goal to come to know the language. He also acknowledges the fact that it's important that this is a team effort. This doesn't fall all on the shoulders of the parish director to do this alone. He talks about this team approach. So the goal would be the different roles. He talks specifically about, number one, the attitude of the parish. Like, what's the pastoral attitude of serving people with special needs? Talks about making sure it's a long-term plan and not just a short-term answer. not about short term, like let's get it done, but long term, what is established and consistent the entire time. And have a pastor's heart, right? Shepherding, being patient and full of compassion. So the attitude of the parish is going to be the remedy for the anxiety that the parents and the participants are going to have. So if the parish has an openness and a joy and an inclusivity to welcome people with special needs, then the parents and the children and the adults will be more relaxed, and it'll reduce the anxiety levels immediately. So the pastor's role is chief shepherd to make it a priority to serve people with disabilities. That is key. That's key for our pastors to understand that. So encouraging the staff and the volunteers to take on the different roles and actively communicate how we can really walk with young people and children and young adults, especially when they're walking towards the sacraments, which is really important. Then you have like the catechetical leader, which would be ensuring appropriate religious education, and then making sure that adaptive catechesis is a part of the entire parish school of religion, not just a one and done, but it's always a part of the entire program. So how do you integrate it? What happens when a person that has a child that's possibly at a third grade level, how can you just immediately put them into a third grade adaptive plan already in place, ready to go? You don't have to recreate, other than to get to know the young person in the family, how they communicate, and start working with a one-to-one mentor. And of course, an adult catechist too that walks with them too. And then he talks about program leader role, but I really want to focus on just the last few minutes, he calls it the near peer faith mentor role, which is the key relationship between the student and the teenager. And we always we're really asking for things for our young people to do that's different. And a lot of times this doesn't come up, but it's more prevalent than what we think it is, inviting young people into some place that's a little bit out of their zone, but they're so natural and gifted at being able to do this. So an awareness that this is for real. This teenager needs to understand that this is for real and consistency matters, that they're totally committed to it. Understanding and reviewing the lessons with them beforehand so that they're confident, so that just in case it kind of goes off, that they can learn how to communicate with the language of the young person they're catechizing, at the same time stay on task. And then being able to work with the parents. That's a very, very, very important role. So then he talks about, how do you start a program, learning how to communicate it. And then he goes into the different sacraments and following the Usccb guidelines that Julia was just talking about. So I'm happy to send this document out, this outline, but I really encourage people to buy the book. It's not very expensive. It's from Loyola Press, and I was very impressed by it, and I learned a lot. So we are working on, and at the end of this document, you'll see resources and recommendations for adaptive catechesis. And I'll add the ones, Julia, that you talked about too.
Oh, great.
Has some of those that I missed, especially the little pamphlet that I hadn't seen that one. We refer to the Rose Kennedy program too, but it's hard to get that in a digital form. I know you can buy the binders for them, but we don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel and remake our catechesis. I find that the adaptive programs are already in line and in place and ready to go. We just have to be open to researching them. And it's our goal to make these resources available for everyone to check out, to review, to make their own. And even if you want to apply through Catholic Education Trust Fund grant, to actually buy the kit yourself. I know the Loyola kit, Finding God, it's $500. But that kit is huge. It is huge. And so we're breaking it up into binders for different areas and levels, but it'll be from the lowest grade level all the way to the highest with adults, and then every sacramental prep in between. Not to sell it, but to let you know that it's available for checkout and for referencing. So any thoughts on that, Julia, or anybody else?
I was just thinking when you were mentioning how it's available for every level. I believe it's Sadler. They also have a great program where every single grade level and every single chapter, every single book they have, they say, here's how you can adapt this specific lesson. So it's already there for you, which is great that they have that's already available. So just want to mention that.
I like the Loyola kit is good too, because it has lots of little toys to play with. It's got all the visuals.
Yeah.
What I like about the actual curriculum itself is that it sometimes it transfers over into the learning ability of each young person. So let's say you have candidates for confirmation and they're a high school age, but each one is at different levels. Sometimes the adaptive boxes, those box kits, are a little bit kind of remedial, but actually the suggestions and the curriculum are a little bit more challenging. So, it really is encompassing. Been very impressed with kind of reading that and understanding it.
Another thing I just wanted to mention, the partners you were saying, the teenage partners, I just wanted to say when I was in high school, I had a similar program, and I just noticed how those without disabilities, the teenagers without disabilities, it really brought them into the church. They felt like they were actually doing something, and they felt like their relationships were actually authentic, and it really helps the whole church. That program really changed my life, so I really recommend it.
It's beautiful. That was a good experience for me, but one of my favorite was when the Special Olympics came to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the summer of, I believe it was 83. And I volunteered, and I was paired with the children from Alaska, believe it or not. So the Olympic team from Alaska. And oh my gosh, I just fell in love with all those children. They were so cute. They were really hot though, because it's like June and July in Louisiana. But I learned so much from their joy, and just seeing the joy from their parents and their coaches, and just that, and witnessing family and friends that have children with special needs has just been such an awareness. I think that the greatest gift that anyone can do, any parish can do, is to provide consistent adaptive catechesis with a welcome mat open all the time for the parents, because it's a moment of evangelization to invite them in, because it's just such a struggle. It's every day is very difficult sometimes for some families, and some days are harder than others, but just so they know that their parish is there for them, their church is there with them to welcome their children into the community and them as a family. I think it's just so important. I really do. All right. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, are you ready to do this? Among all the other things. So like I said before, Charlene, who's the executive director, will be with us in January and talk about some very practical ways to begin implementing. This is nothing that can happen like next week, right? So just watch your expectations and don't put so much in yourself that, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about this. It's okay, right? As long as you're on a plan, set a plan and have something ready maybe to go by next summer or next fall, or accompany just one family and see how that works for you, because it's going to take a little while to cultivate the confidence of the catechist and reach out for team mentors. So just take your time and be patient with yourself, but know that we're going to be here to walk with you. And Julia, I really want to thank you for being with us. I think we might have to get you back from some practicalities too.
I would love that.
Yeah, it was
great. It was really nice to meet you all.
It's a joy to have you. Thank you for what you're doing for what we can't do, right? We're not equipped for that, but you've just spent so much time and effort, and I'm sure passion into that. So thank you very much for doing all that you do.
And again, if you have any suggestions about the website or any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is jgilberto@ncpd.org. So feel free to contact me anytime.
And we'll send that in our follow-up email when we send the recording. Thank you. Hey,
Thank
Barry,
you. Yes.
You want to close us in prayer, Barry? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay, sure. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. come into our hearts. Inspire us today to give ourselves ever more over to Jesus as his disciples. Help us to especially see the goodness in our differences. Help us to not have expectations that everybody should look like us or act like us or feel like us. Especially show us how we can love you more and manifest your loving heart to those we're called to serve, especially those that are on the margins, those who are marginalized, or those we might be afraid of because they're different. Help us to love those who are different than us, and help us to see how we're different from them, as our document said. And we pray, as always,